Alright, welcome everybody, it's Hitman, and today we are going to be doing my official ranking of the Resident Evil games that I played. First off, man, I'm very disappointed in how many games that I missed out on due to just, I don't know, not having access to those games, I guess. But man, there's a lot of games that we weren't able to play, even though like a few of these are duplicates. Like we've obviously played Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, and 4, the remakes, but we didn't play the OG versions, which I think is okay. But man, there's still some other games that we weren't able to play, unfortunately. But I'm gonna be ranking the games that I did play, and let's see what is best ST and what is worst F, which is a fail. And for an ST game, I'm only gonna give one game that ST status because I think there's only one game out of the bunch that deserves that. And as a fail, I think there's only one game as well. And if you watch my streams, you know which game I loved most and which game I hated most. And I think right off the bat, I'm going to get the worst game out of the way. And if you saw my streams, you already know. Oh my god, Resident Evil 6, the worst Resident Evil game I played by far. This is gonna be the only game that gets a fail, that gets an F. No other game, in my opinion, deserves a fail out of the Resident Evil games that I played, except for Resident Evil 6. One of the worst games, not the worst Resident Evil games, one of the worst games I've played in general. It doesn't even feel like a Resident Evil game. It's just chaotic, it has no horror, gameplay is just random and all over the place. The only way I see you liked Resident Evil 6 if you played with a friend, or maybe you just did mercenaries and you just mucked around. But for a single player experience, this game was absolutely terrible. I hated it. It's the only game I couldn't complete. I did beat Leon's campaign. I got about 2 hours into Chris's campaign, and then I just quit. I watched the rest of the cutscenes. I watched the storyline. The story was not even worth it. Gameplay wasn't worth it. Resident Evil 6 sucks. If you like it, it's your taste. That's up to you. Straight out low-key, you have pretty bad taste in gaming, but whatever. If you like Resident Evil 6, you liked it. For me, I personally think it was the worst in the series. Now, moving on from the worst, we're going to talk about the best now, and then I'll fill in the rest of the categories. But the best Resident Evil game, and it's the only S tier I'm going to give, is Resident Evil 4. The remake, even the OG is amazing. A lot of people tell me how great the OG was. I've personally watched the OG game. I just didn't want to play it because these old school games, man, they are a struggle to play. But the Resident Evil 4 remake, I mean, there's so many good things I can say about it. Good story, great characters, mad boss fights. The combat and gameplay is honestly amazing. You can do stealth, you get a whole bunch of weapons, upgrades, loot, exploration, treasures, a wide variety of enemies, parrying options, traps on the floor, defensive abilities, more offensive abilities. There's so much you can do when it comes to its combat. Even though it's a linear path of the game, they still chuck in some puzzles and some hard areas to fight against enemies. The level design is perfect in my opinion. Resident Evil 4 Remake, it's the only S tier I'm going to give. Not saying that any of the other Resident Evil games are bad except for Resident Evil 6, but Resident Evil 4 Remake, that's the GOAT of all GOATs. It's the best one I played. I loved it. Alright, so now that we've got the best and worst out of the way, I'm just going to start filling in the table, and I think I'm just going to go in order of the games that I played. The next game up is Resident Evil 1, the remake. I didn't play the OG, but I'm pretty sure they play very similar. Resident Evil 1, like I said, was the first game that I played in the series. I loved it. Classic horror. It was very different to play, especially because it's an older like an older gen game, you know, with the tank controls and that fixed camera that they have. I'm not used to playing games like that. It's been a while since I played a game like that, and to be honest, I actually liked it. It suited a Resident Evil title, the fixed camera. It felt like you were in a horror movie. A great soundtrack in the background. Every time you entered a different room, you know, it was a creepy vibe. Sometimes they'll put no music at all and then an enemy will pop up. They set it you up perfectly with the horror. A classic horror, amazing puzzles, a very difficult game as well. For an inexperienced Resident Evil player, like, you're gonna struggle with this. Like me personally, I struggled playing this game. It was my first classic Resident Evil game that I played. I obviously never played the game before, and it was hard. I was getting lost all over the place. Exploring the mansion was like very difficult. But speaking of the mansion, probably the most iconic map in the series, Resident Evil 1, amazing. Good weapons, tough enemies, the Crimson Head enemies, I think they're called. Probably the hardest basic enemy that you experience in the whole series. I pretty shocked that it didn't make a return in the later games. But yeah, the Crimson Heads, the what are they called? Not the Lickers, the Hunters. Very tough to deal with. Good puzzles, difficult puzzles, boss fights. It is what it is. Story, it is what it is. Nothing special. But if we're talking about a classic survival horror game, this game, I mean, honestly, if you put it in the S tier, I wouldn't blame you because it really does come to styles. I just prefer the style of Resident Evil 4. But if you prefer the style of Resident Evil, the original, I wouldn't blame me if you put it at an S tier, but for me personally, I'm going to put this at an A tier. So not as good as Resident Evil 4, but definitely up there as one of the GOATs in the series. Now next up we have Resident Evil 2 Remake. I didn't play the OG unfortunately, but the remake, I mean, I really loved the Resident Evil 2 Remake. I mean, it was very similar to the original Resident Evil, survival horror, but this time you explore the RPD as Leon. I love Leon, one of my favorite characters in the series. I'll probably do a tier list of characters as well after this video, but Resident Evil 2 Remake, in my opinion, personally, I preferred the exploration of the RPD compared to the mansion. But again, if you like the mansion more than the RPD, I wouldn't argue on that because they're both very iconic, mad places to explore. Good boss fights, story, it is what it is. Like I said, it's a Resident Evil story isn't anything amazing. Some of the Resident Evil games do have a lot better stories than the others, but it's just your classic horror story, zombies everywhere, enemies everywhere, and of course the addition of Mr. X in this game. Mr. X, the tyrant, chasing you around, puts you in such difficult positions all the time, especially if because it's a survival horror and they give you a limited amount of ammo, you have to strategize and be smart with how you're gonna shoot enemies, or you're gonna pick your fights. And like, for example, if there's a licker in a hallway that you left and you kind of forget because you're exploring the whole RPD, but you have to go back to that hallway, but then Mr. X chases you in there and you're forced to run, and because you're running, the licker starts to attack you, you're screwed. So there's a lot of strategy when it comes to the game. I love it. I love the exploration of the RPD. I love the enemies, good boss fights, and playing as Leon. The Ada part was alright as well. Usually every Resident Evil game has a part where you have to play as a side character. The Ada part wasn't too bad. Obviously not as good as the Leon parts. But to me, Resident Evil 2 Remake is an A-tier game. And I would personally as well put it over Resident Evil 1. That's just a tasting. Some people like the classic survival horror of and the fixed camera and the style that Resident Evil 1 brings. Me personally, RE2. Resident Evil 3 now. Now, this is where a little bit of controversy might come in, but actually, no, I don't think so. Apparently, the Resident Evil 3 Remake didn't just do so well with, new fans and old fans. Apparently, the OG RE3 Nemesis is a lot better than RE3 Remake, and I stuffed up not playing the original and playing the remake instead. But like I said, these older games are harder to get a hold of and, to play and to stream and all that stuff, just what you have access to. And plus, the gameplay is it's so old school. But RE3 Remake, I was kind of disappointed. Maybe because we just played Resident Evil 1 and then Resident Evil 2, which was so, great, like such great games, like games that I have, had a lot of respect for and obviously gave it high ratings. But with RE3 Remake, I felt like it was a Wish version of RE2 Remake. Like it was just an RE2 Remake, but not as good. It felt like an RE2 Part 2, not like an RE3. I don't know, the story didn't interest me. Jill as a character, in Resident Evil 1, I liked her, but in Resident Evil 3 Remake, I felt like they tried to make her like some badass Ellie from Last of Us, or like Lara Croft from freaking Tomb Raider. I didn't enjoy her character. Carlos was an alright guy. His missions were alright as well, just a whole bunch of action. But with Jill's missions and the Nemesis, I feel like they just really stuffed up on the Nemesis because he has the same approach as Mr. X, and like when you see the Nemesis and his abilities is actually more powerful and scarier than Mr. X, but I was actually more scared of Mr. X. That shouldn't even make sense. Like, if you've played the games, you would understand. I was more scared of Mr. X than I was scared of Nemesis, even though Nemesis is portrayed as a more scary enemy. He's more powerful, he's more dangerous, even his image is way more scarier. But the way they implemented him into the game, they made him look like, I don't know. He wasn't all that. He wasn't scary at all. He barely popped up, and when he did pop up, you're just running away. You're also outdoors, so you have a whole bunch of space and room to get away. And plus, you have the dodge feature in Resident Evil 3 compared to like where Resident Evil 2 and RE1, you're kind of limited in that in combat. But me personally, RE3 remake could have been a lot better. Not the best, not terrible. It's still a good game. If you enjoy RE3, like you can definitely have some fun with RE3. I had some fun with RE3, but not. I found it a bit ridiculous. I don't know. The boss fights weren't that good as well with Nemesis, and you're fighting Nemesis over and over, but he just keeps mutating into like a different form. I don't know. I didn't find it interesting, to be honest. RE3, I'll give it a C tier. Not that high, not that low. It is what it is. Resident Evil Code Veronica, man, if there is a game that desperately needs a remake, it is this game, because when I first played it, the only thing that was coming, or not the only thing, but the main thing that was coming through my mind is this game had to have been made by a genius, because it is a massive maze. It's a puzzle-solving strategic game with a whole bunch of enemies and tough boss fights. If you watch my streams, this is the most strategic game probably out of them all. The reason why that is because you have to be very smart with your ammo. You have to be very smart with your puzzle pieces and your exploration. So like there was a time in the beginning of the map, I think you're in a prison. There was one section that I just forgot to check. I don't know why, because this Code Veronica has that fixed camera. For some reason, I just didn't find this place, and I kept exploring through the game, and it was a puzzle that you had to go back into the future, and then I believe it's a shield item that you get. When I got that shield item, I was wandering around the new map thinking, where the hell do I put this thing? I have no idea where to go, and it took me like a solid hour and a half to figure out this new area of the game. I had to backtrack all the way back to the prison, and if you play the Code Veronica map, it's massive. So you're not thinking I have to go all the way back there. But then eventually you do, and I found that area that I didn't see originally, so I was like, crap, man. So like, it's very smart, very mazy, very puzzly, tough enemies as well. There's that one enemy where he has like that big, long, one arm, stretchy, I don't know what the hell he's called, but he's like a hunter, but he plays different. There's also hunters in this game, good weapons, a fantastic game. Honestly, if he had a remake, and they fixed up the bugs and a little bit of issues, and obviously, with the 4K graphics, 60 FPS or whatever they can do with it, I mean, it would look amazing and play amazing as well. Obviously, there's some bugs and issues that I have with the game. The story in this game as well in Code Veronica is pretty good. Good characters, are very cheesy. A lot of bugs and creature enemies that you get. But the only thing that I would complain about in this game is the fact that when you play as Chris and when you play as Claire, it's like basically the exact same thing. Like there was no point of switching characters. You just unlock a different door with Chris than you wouldn't with Claire. So they could have added some, make it like different pathways type of things until they met. But it kind of just plays the exact same way whether you're playing as Chris or Claire. But as well, the genius of, when you put your, like for example, if Chris has an item on him and then you go play as Claire, let's just say I had the grenade launcher with Claire, and I put it in the item box, and then Chris goes to the item box and picks that up. When I go back to playing as Claire, she can't get the grenade launcher anymore because Chris has it, So there's a lot of strategy with this game. It's a very smart game. I really enjoyed it. It frustrated me a lot as well. There was a part where you fight the tyrant. I wasted all my ammo killing him, and I killed him. But the thing is, the game gave me no more of the explosive arrows. So when I fought him on the plane, if you watch that stream, it took me 2 hours to beat him because I had to do it with generic weapons. It was very, very tough. But I put myself in that position. The game doesn't, cater for you. Like if you're doing bad, well, guess what? You're stuffed up, And there's no difficulty setting as well. In my opinion, it's the hardest game out of the whole series. There's no difficulty setting. Everyone has to deal with that default setting. It's a tough game. It's a great game. I really liked it. Is it as good as the classic Resident Evil and RE2 remake? No. Is it as bad as RE3? No. So I would put it at a B tier. Next up, we have Resident Evil 0. And to be honest, with Resident Evil 0, I don't have much to say. I'm just going to flat out say I didn't really enjoy Resident Evil 0 that much. It was a prequel of the game. Storyline wise, it is what it is. Again, it's nothing special. The villain and the characters, I didn't really connect with them well. And even the main characters that you play as Billy, I think his name is, and Rebecca. Didn't really give a crap about them. It's not like the same as playing as like Chris or Claire or Leon. But yeah, I don't know. They did try to do something different with the whole duel. So you're playing as two characters as once type of thing. And there was actually some really good, interesting puzzles, that you have to figure out by playing and switching between characters, which I liked. Did I really love it? No. It kind of got annoying, especially the fact that you don't have an item box and you kind of just have to drop your stuff wherever you have them. If you can't pick something up, guess what? It's stuck in that room. You can travel, throughout the whole map and then realize, oh, where did I put that thing? You look at the map and you have to go all the way back to that one specific room rather than it being at a item box, which is just a lot more convenient. Some people like that. Me personally, I didn't. And other than the whole co-op thing, which you actually can't play co-op because back then there still wasn't a co-op feature. It's a single player co-op. I don't know. You can't play with a friend or you're always forced to play with an AI, but you control them both. Some missions you have to do with Billy. Some missions you have to do with Claire, with Rebecca. The puzzles were good. Some were really hard, but nothing special, to be honest. The map, the train, even the mansion, like I don't know. Not as good as the other games. I would probably say so far out of the whole games that we've played, excluding Resident Evil 6, because obviously that's a fail, I would put RE0 even behind RE3 Remake. Some people absolutely love RE0 and some people really want it to become a remake and so that way you can do co-op or whatever the case may be. I could see success in that, but personally, RE0, nothing special to me. Now, Resident Evil 5, this is where the series takes a turn. I wouldn't say for the worse, but it definitely changes a lot with Resident Evil 5. So obviously it came after Resident Evil 4, and Resident Evil 4 was such a major success. Even the OG was huge. Probably the most popular Resident Evil game of all time. Actually, no, I'm pretty sure it is the most popular Resident Evil game of all time is Resident Evil 4. But Resident Evil 5... it is a co-op game. You can play it single player. I played it single player, or you can play with a friend. If you don't play with a friend, then you have to stick with the AI, which is Sheva. You play as Chris Redfield, who Chris Redfield is an absolute beast. Sheva is kind of just a random character who I actually didn't mind at all. And her AI companion, the AI companion wasn't too annoying. There was some stages where she'll have a health item, and I would have like basically full health, and she would spray me anyways. It would bloody annoy me. And there were some times where I would want to call her so she can take an item off me so I can empty out my storage a little bit, inventory, and she wouldn't do it. So it was a bit annoying, but not too bad to deal with. I was able to handle it, and her dying and stuff wasn't too much of a problem. But the main issue with this game is the game wants it to be Resident Evil 4. It has combat and gameplay like Resident Evil 4 with a whole bunch of enemies and pretty good map and level design as well, but it's just not as good as Resident Evil 4. Plus, you have the AI companion that you have to handle as well and make sure she's okay, which can make it a bit more difficult and more annoying as well. So just a little bit more stress. The game lacks puzzles. The story was actually decent, but a bit predictable as well with the whole Jill, turning into a, she was the masked character. I think I called it as soon as I said, okay, that must be Jill. Wesker boss fight at the end as well was a bit of a disappointment. Not that great of a boss fight, but Wesker is such an awesome character, probably the best villain in the series. But Resident Evil 5, like I said, it's like Resident Evil 4 but worse. And my biggest complaint about the game when I was playing it is the inventory system. It has the Resident Evil 4 approach where they give you a bunch of ammo, a bunch of weapons, a bunch of items, but they give you the inventory of a Resident Evil 1 game. And like when you play Resident Evil 4, your inventory is big. You can handle a lot of things. Yeah, you might run out of space that you can obviously upgrade later. But with Resident Evil 5, they give you a limited amount of spots that you can hold stuff. But they give you so many things that you want to use. The upgrade system was worse. The guns, not that great. Worse in my opinion. Resident Evil 5, I'll probably put it at a C tier. I think I enjoyed it more than Resident Evil 0, but I don't think I liked it more then RE3 Remake. So I'm just going to put this right in the middle here at a C tier behind RE3. Alright, so here is probably the most underrated game in the series, Resident Evil Revelations. It's a game that I'd never heard of. You know, you obviously hear of the main title games. You know, when you talk about Resident Evil games that are the best and most popular, you think of RE7, the original, you think of RE4, RE2, even RE3 Nemesis. But I never heard of Revelations. It's a side game. I'm like, of course, I'm going to try it. Why not? I'm going to play as many games as I have access to. And Revelations, I must say, is underrated. It is a great game with a great story. Good characters. You play as Jill and Chris, and you actually play as a lot more characters as well throughout the game. Some new characters. A great storyline. Probably the best storyline in the series. Again, just comes down to taste, but definitely they went a bit more in-depth with the story, a whole bunch of plot twists, and the map as well, you know, exploring the ship. They brought back that horror style, which it kind of felt like a Resident Evil 1 game, but they also put combat sections where it felt like a Resident Evil 4 game. It was like a great blend of everything together. Not as good as a classic title like a RE2 or RE1, but definitely higher than a mid-tier game. I really enjoyed it. The story and the episode style that the game had kept you wanting to play more and more because you wanted to find out more and more about the game. The boss fights were pretty good. There was one section which was probably one of the best fights in the whole Resident Evil up to this point, was when you're fighting like you're fighting some enemy. He's screaming Mayday, Mayday over and over. You unlock the door, then a whole bunch of these other enemy characters jump in. It's like a whole swarm of them, and you're trying to focus on the big guy, but there's all these normal enemies as well. And mind you, the more normal enemies are a different breed and a different type of enemy that you would see in another Resident Evil game like RE2 or RE1. So it was a very different type of game. I really enjoyed it. I played it on PC. I loved it. Honestly, no complaints about it. It was just a bit basic, a little bit too easy for my liking. There was a higher difficulty option. I did play on standard, but I played the majority on standard anyways, and I felt like it was a bit too easy. But the puzzles were good. Map design was good. Really enjoyable. Had that classic horror. I would have liked a bit more horror and a bit more scares, because 70% of the game is like I was loving it, and then it starts to lead towards more that action type of gameplay where, you know, you're on a boat and you have a mini turret and you're just spraying down a massive boss, and the bosses were pretty bad, to be honest. Yeah, the bosses weren't that good, actually. Now that I think about it properly, the bosses weren't good at all. But yeah, it turns into a whole bunch of action scenes where, you know, it kind of just fell away from its identity, and it couldn't really, you know, grasp on what type of game it wanted to be. But like 60-70% through the game, I was like loving it, and then towards the end, it was like, it is what it is, and I obviously finished it through. The story was still good, the ending was good. Revelations 1 gets a solid ranking from me. Not as good to put it with, you know, the 80 type of games, but I would put it on the level of a Code Veronica. I would even say it's better than Code Veronica. Now with Revelations 2, I don't have much to say about this game, to be honest. It's similar to Resident Evil Revelations 1, but it's just not as good. I feel like the game wanted to be like a Resident Evil 4/5 style of game where they had action sections and the level design was, you know, like a linear path, similar to like RE4, where you're just basically going forward. If you really think about it, you might pick up a puzzle item here and there, and there might be a locked door or something like that. Resident Evil Revelations 2 has that style, whereas Revelations 1 had more of a RE1/RE2 style, where it wasn't so linear, the path. You were kind of all over the place, figuring your way around the boat, which is something that I really enjoyed. But with Revelations 2, even though I don't mind a linear path, I feel like it just lacked enemies. It lacked enemy variety. It lacked, you know, the fight. It lacked the difficulty. It lacked the struggle of getting to the place that you're meant to get to. Like with RE4, they throw a whole bunch of enemies at you with mini bosses, and they make it really tough on you. Same with like a game with like RE5, they throw a whole bunch of enemies at you. With Revelations 2, not so much. It's kind of like they put the ammo and enemy types the same they would give you in like Resident Evil 1 or Resident Evil 2, but they don't put any enemies, you know? So like whole bunch of ammo, whole bunch of weapons, things that you can use, different ways to, you can stun them, you can knock them out. You play as Barry, who's an awesome character, by the way. Good storyline as well, but then even the storyline kind of dragged a little bit. I don't know, by the end of it, I was like, whatever. So not as good as a story, not as good as gameplay as Revelations 1, a bit worse than them. Still an enjoyable game, especially for like a spin-off or a side game, whatever you want to call them. Not bad, but also not so great. If I was to give it a rating, I don't even know where to put this, to be honest. I don't even think I enjoyed it more than RE5. I think I enjoyed the majority of the games more than RE0. Man, where do I put this? Honestly, it's even hard to say that I liked it more than RE0. Like, you know what? I think it's gonna be the first game that goes in the D tier. A bit low. It's a bit low. It is what it is. I mean, I would give the rest of the games no lower than a C. Like RE0, it still does have, a good concept and good, like if you enjoyed that whole co-op scenario, then you would probably put this at a B or an A tier, maybe even an S tier, honestly, if that's your style of game. But with Revelations 2, it lacks Resident Evil feel, it lacks the style, it lacks the enemies. It does get good in some sections, but like 80% of the game, I kind of was bored and really didn't enjoy it all that much. Definitely not as good as the first, so I think I'm going to put this in the D tier, unfortunately. Alright, now we got Resident Evil 7. So the last two games, RE7 and RE Village. Resident Evil 7, I absolutely loved. They went back to the classic style horror. They changed it up a little bit as well by going first-person mode instead of third-person mode or the fixed camera. I honestly really enjoyed the first-person mode. For Resident Evil 7, it just complemented the gameplay because the game is majority in tight hallways and tight corridors and tight spaces, and enemies are in your face. The mansion or the house, guest house, whatever it's called in Resident Evil 7 that you're exploring is really fun to explore. Not linear, it's like more all over the place, very similar to like a Resident Evil 1. They even bring back the whole shotgun puzzle, very similar to Resident Evil 1. It had that type of identity. The horror in Resident Evil 7 is probably the highest in all the games. This game was scary. I jumped out of my seat a few times. The eeriness, having Jack on your back as well. That was a good rhyme. Jack is on you constantly throughout the game. He plays like, Mr. X. And he's a scary character himself. He pops out of nowhere. He'll chop off your leg. He'll chop off your hand. Poor Ethan freaking gets his hand chopped off in this game probably 50 times. Gore, boss fights were not that great, actually. But the puzzles were great. The map design, the level design, everything like that was great. The horror was great. The weapon choices were great. My biggest complaint was that stupid Marguerite fight. That was by far the worst boss fight, probably in the whole series, the Marguerite bug fight. I played on Madhouse, which was probably a mistake, but she's so tanky. She takes a whole bunch of ammo, and it feels like you're never doing any damage to her. It took me like 2 hours to beat her. It was just torture, but that's a bad boss fight. Even if you were playing on standard or easy, the design of that boss fight is pretty bad, and so are the rest of the boss fights. But Resident Evil aren't really known for their boss fights anyways. But if you want a classic survival horror game, Resident Evil 7 you're gonna love. And personally, from the first person perspective, it makes it even better. The game does lack a little bit of enemy variety, and the story is a bit more complex, but also it is what it is. But for me personally, Resident Evil 7 gets a definite high rating in the A tier. I didn't like it as much as RE2 Remake. And if you want to put RE1 over Resident Evil 7, I wouldn't blame you. But me personally, I would rather replay RE7 again than play Resident Evil 1. That's me personally, but RE7 to me is like top tier. And here we have it, the final Resident Evil game, Resident Evil Village. Man, I'm exhausted ranking all the games that I played. Imagine I played the rest of those as well, but Resident Evil Village, there's actually quite a bit of controversy when it comes to this game. Some people either really loved it or some people really disliked it, and I don't understand why you would dislike Resident Evil Village. I found the story great. I found the character development and the twist with Ethan really good, because Ethan was a bit of I don't know, he was very bland in Resident Evil 7. In Resident Evil Village, he becomes a bit more out there, but then he becomes the father of the year by the end of the game. Father of the century, what am I saying? Father of the year. Saves Rose, takes down the Mother Miranda and the Megamycete. Good storyline in this game. I loved exploring the levels in this game. It was pretty linear. You can go around to the sides and like explore if you really want to. You don't have to. That's completely up to you. So you can access more treasures. But you want that stuff if you want the most of your game to play it more. Me personally, I love doing that stuff. I love exploration. And if you loved Resident Evil 4 like I did, I don't see why you wouldn't love Resident Evil Village. There's great level design. The enemy design as well with the Lycans are very hard to fight against. You feel like it's very different to your classic Resident Evil enemy. These guys, they're using wrestling moves, and they're getting on one hand and posting and moving to the side and sidestepping you and jumping at you. The bosses as well are definitely an improvement from the rest of the series. I think Mother Miranda, that boss fight is probably the best. Because she fights like she's a Valkyrie, like Sigrun, not as hard, but also not so easy compared to the other Resident Evils. It's not very straightforward. You do have to learn her moves. You do have to be defensive. You do have to move around and evade and not just tank, throw a whole bunch of ammo. She is very tanky, but that's like a lot of the Resident Evil boss fights. But Village, to me, I loved exploring the village. I love the Castle Dimitrescu, where you have, Lady D, who kind of plays like a Mr. X, who scared me a few times. The boss fight wasn't that great in that one. Then you have that horror era with is it Moreau? No, Benevento, I think the name is. That little doll. That horror section, I remember the first time I ever played that was scary as. Some pretty good puzzles in there as well. Very slow, very eerie, very scary. Things that you would enjoy in an RE game. I feel like it had a great mix with, some classic horror. It had some, good gameplay like Resident Evil 4. It had a whole blend of everything put together. And to me, personally, Village, I loved it. I don't understand the controversy behind it. I can see why, someone might not like it. The only thing I would say is I think this game would have been better in a third-person mode. And I know that the DLC does have a third-person option, but for the main game, it didn't. I think this game should have been third person because you're in a more open, wide area, whereas in Resident Evil 7, kind of in like a closed area. But to me, Village, top tier, not as good as RE4, but definitely up there. I would even put it over Resident Evil 2. That's how high I think of Resident Evil Village, I don't know. I loved it. But as you can see from this table, there's a lot of good games in the series. S tier Resident Evil 4 A tier games that, everything over B tier, I would say is a must play. You should definitely play these two. 100% have to play these. And the GOAT of GOATs, RE4, I've probably played through that game 5-6 times. Shout out to Sarkis, the bloke has played the game like 300 times. he helped me get a few treasures and stuff. He knows the game in and out. And actually have a few of these games platinumed as well, because I just wanted to go back and replay them. RE6, don't play unless you have a friend and you just want to muck around, or if you're high or drunk, which I wouldn't recommend doing. But that's the only way I see enjoying this game, because, oh my god, Resident Evil 6. I would avoid Revelations 2 as well. I don't know. It just wasn't that great to me, just very basic. And even these CT games, you might think they're better than what I thought. So I would even say you should give these a try. So basically everything over CT, I would say play. But there you go. That's my official ranking. The series of playing every Resident Evil game is over for now. If I have access to, maybe even one day I'll go back and play these OG Resident Evil games just to have a feel of them. And then obviously in a couple months, Resident Evil 9 will be coming out, and we might have to update this list. So there you go. That's the video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments, if you would change anything. I know some of my viewers would definitely change up, Resident Evil 6 and probably these other games as well. But anyways, thank you all for watching. Leave a like, subscribe. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.